All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you are here from OpenHat and are new to SIGPwny, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about editors, more specifically text editors. Yeah, again, if we have any new faces here, hi. If you have any old faces here, also hi. Yeah, so announcements, ECTM. That's kind of heating up right about now. Meetings are Saturdays at 5 p.m. then, 5 or 6.
We're doing something intense.
Okay, good to know. Sub-team meetings. So if you're interested in that, talk to Min after the meeting. We'll add you to the role on Discord, so you get an overview of all the announcements. And yeah, we're starting to actually build the thing. So, and the next weekend are CTF calls. So come play. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay. Oh man, you hit the flag. First time.
Oh, that's the flag. Oh,
that whole thing. Man, Sam is going to be irate. Yeah, this is the meeting flag. It's kind of long, so I'll take you give you a minute to type this in. It'll also be at the end if you want to wait for that. Yeah. If you want to copy and paste, you can also just open Vims and try to Control-C, and it will print this. All right, now, again, before we begin, some people may have, oh, yeah, what's up?
no, it's
case sensitive. So make sure, yeah, those are just regular angle brackets, not chevrons or anything. And those are spaces, not underscores. Yeah, but before we get more into it, some people may have heard rumors that you know, people here have harsh opinions on their editor choice. I just want to address the claim that is completely untrue. Whatever editor you use is completely fine, unless it's anything other than Emacs. All right. All right, now moving on. So why text edit? It's a very useful skill to have. This flag thing did not work out as well as I thought it would. Yeah, but basically the overview of text editing. So kind of back in the day when you had typewriters, pen and paper, punch cards. This is a very slow way to edit things. If you had a mistake, you had to like use whiteout or I don't know, whatever. It was very, very slow to write and edit and correct bugs in computer programs. And back when computers kind of operated line by line, a lot of the editors, some people may have heard of Ed or EX, which is now kind of a mode within Vim, operates on a line by line thing. So you can do like, there's a P command to print a line. And so, yeah, if you're using like sed or not AWK, but if you're using sed, it operates line by line. And this is because of this history of teletypewriters only doing one line at a time. Like if you just imagine a typewriter to like hit a carriage return to go to the next line. Yeah, and so some people may edit their text like this. I know, you know, this is not an uncommon occurrence where you just type in Microsoft Notepad or text edit or whatever. And this is not necessarily, this is a way to edit text, not necessarily the worst way to edit text, but it is certainly far from ideal. You could definitely be more efficient with your time and with your editing. Also, to my knowledge, you can't use Notepad over SSH. So we can improve. This is kind of, we'll put this as the baseline. So can anyone tell me like what you would think you would do in a text editor? I will even accept the verb edit. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Configure. Yes, there's lots of configuring to be done. Yeah, but the whole idea, we want to be able to add text. We don't want our text file to stay the same size. We want to be able to modify the text, remove text. Ideally, in our text editor, to help us do these things, we want to be able to jump around different parts of the file. There's some other like nicer features which are not typically required, but would definitely be nice to have. Undo, redo. If you didn't have Control Z, I think you'd have a very bad time. And there's this idea of an integrated development environment. Show of hands, how many people here use what they would consider to be like an IDE? Yeah, so most people. So again, this is kind of where it becomes, there's text editors, and you can write your manuscript or your gen ed homework, and it's still very nice. Then this IDE becomes very useful when you're doing development. You have to do compilation, you have to run shell scripts, you have to do debugging, and this role kind of gets folded into text editors, or most text editors that people use. All right, so the first thing we're going to discuss, and kind of the main topic of today's meeting, I will put this down because it's kind of getting in my way, are modal editors. So the idea behind a modal editor, or I guess before we talk about modal editors, we'll talk about notation. This notation is important because Vim and to an extent Emacs and other editors based on these all are basically a language. All the movement operations you can do, it's really it's basically like a programming, not like a programming language, but it's close to that. So keys you press on the keyboard are the actions, and you can just write those out, and that is like that just describes the actions. So if you see like the key X, this just means press the X key. If you see G and capital F, that would mean press like the lowercase g key on your keyboard, and then hold Shift and press F. This seems kind of intuitive, but I'm just making sure we're all on the same page. If you see Control X, Control-X, that means hold Control and then press X. Sometimes they capitalize this, but you usually don't actually need for this to be capitalized. Although maybe if you do some non-trivial remapping, you may need to also press Shift. But generally speaking, you don't. This can also appear as C-X. We have some in angle brackets. It usually means it's a special control key that is not just one of not like an alpha, a character that's in the alphabet or a numerical digit. So ESC would be escape. And you're just going to set the escape key, and then this colon. When you see something like this, in the context of Vim, it means enter command line mode, and then type this out. And again, in the angle brackets, you have enter. That just means hit the enter key on your keyboard. You also might see this as CR for carried return. So if you see enter, return, CR, they all mean the same thing, at least in Vim. Yeah, any questions before we move on? And we will talk about the different modes, because it's a modal editor, but we're just getting this notation out of the way. And then another slide on Emacs, which we'll talk about towards the end of the meeting. The only non-trivial thing here is you have this meta key, which is denoted by a capital M. And the meta key is usually Alt or Command. Most keyboards nowadays don't actually have a real meta key, so that will kind of get delegated to a different key. This kind of which key is meta depends on your installation of Emacs, so make sure to check that out. But usually it's Alt. The other thing, this is again a similar notation to Vim. Uppercase C-U, that means Control U. This has a special meaning in Emacs for the universal argument. And this is essentially a way to give an argument to a function you may call with keystrokes. Because as you can imagine, it'd probably be hard to provide function arguments just using keystrokes. So that's what the universal argument does. It's not, it can be pretty useful. But yeah, like it's kind of a non-trivial thing that's not covered in the basics. And then just like Vim, we have ABC, escape, and your bread and butter in Emacs is going to be execute extended command, which is invoked with metax, and that lets you execute any interactive Emacs function that is defined within your environment. So yeah, the basics of modal editing is almost entirely keyboard focused. Some editors like to use the mouse, but they're meant to keep your fingers on the keyboard, on the home row as much as possible, and not have to use the mouse. This is accomplished by, most of the keys normally you need to type text, so you can't really overload them. But if you have a modal editor, you can switch into a special mode for typing text, and then all the keys mean what they normally would mean in, like, let's say, Notepad. But then you can switch to a different mode, and now all the keys suddenly have a special function associated with them. and you can switch into different modes for different things. So as we'll see in a second, so in Vim, there's a normal mode, and this is kind of your default home row. This is how you get to other modes, although you can get, the flowchart here is actually quite non-trivial. There's like a giant SVG you can find online, the different state transitions, but for right now, let's just focus on normal mode is kind of your default. This is when you open Vim, you're dropped into normal mode, and not insert mode, unless you specify a special flag. Insert mode is kind of what you expect. You type a key, you type a G, you type an F, a G or an F appears in your buffer. We'll talk about what buffers are later. But this is pretty intuitive. The only thing you should really know about insert mode for right now is that in order to leave insert mode, you have to press escape, and that will take you back to normal mode. And if you're in normal mode and you want to go into insert mode, you can press lowercase I. And we will talk about this later. But if you want to follow along and install Vim on your computer while we're doing this, on most computers it probably already is installed. You can install it on Windows, but I would suggest using it in WSL. So I would suggest that maybe follow along, do a few of these things. So if there's a confusion, you can ask a question. Visual mode. This is this idea of, well, we don't have a mouse. How could I, copy and paste text? How could I copy a sentence? It would be very slow to have to, go one by one, character by character with my arrow keys or something. And so this is the point of visual mode, is that you have many keys to traverse faster and be able to cut, copy, modify, replace blocks of text. And there's some nuance to visual mode. Replace mode is kind of like visual mode, but in the sense that it can only replace text. This is not very commonly used. And then the really important mode that makes Vim very powerful is command line mode or EX mode. And this allows you to run commands in the editor. So you can run shell commands, you can run built-in commands, you can write your own commands in Vim script. This ends up being a very, very powerful utility. You can pull up a file navigator on the side of your screen. So learning how to use command line mode is quite important. This also applies to stuff like searching in a file, doing like a full file search and replace. So command line mode, this is kind of where it's at. And you get into this in normal mode by typing the colon key. And it will show up at the bottom of your screen. It will be a colon, and it will show you the text that you're typing. Unless you run a command. So yeah, we already talked about switching between modes a little bit. Again, just for review, these are the basic ones: visual, normal, insert, and command. So again, normal here, this is where you start off. This is where you start off in Vim. And to get back to normal mode, you press escape. To enter insert mode, there's many different types of keys, because sometimes you'll want to do a movement and then go into insert mode. And it's oftentimes faster to use a specific key to enter it rather than do the movement and then press lowercase I to enter it. You'll kind of pick that up as you go. But the basics being lowercase I for insert, lowercase v for visual, and the colon key for command. So V for visual, I for insert, pretty intuitive. Any questions on this so far? And by default, it will also show you at the bottom of your screen what mode you are in, except for command mode, but it'll also show you the colon. So you should always know what mode you're in Vim. All right, now I think what is typically the most popular question on Stack Overflow. I read the Stack Overflow survey. Supposedly the country where the most developers Google how do I exit Vim is Ukraine. So there's your Vim trivia of the day. So one option is, again, throw your computer on the ground, try to Control C, but that actually doesn't work most of the time. This can be non-trivial. There's Vim jails. UIU CTF 2023, we had Vim jails to try and all you have to do is exit Vim. So yeah, but please don't actually unplug your computer, wait for your laptop to die. That's very time consuming. The basics are you want to get back into normal mode. So once you're in insert mode, if you don't know how to get to normal mode, you'll have a very hard time. So you're gonna want to press escape to get back in normal mode. Sometimes you may be in a special context. So it can't hurt to hit escape a few more times. By default in Emacs, it actually can't hurt to hit escape multiple times because that also can delete the line. But in Vim, you can hit escape as many times as you want, no problem, just to make sure you're back in normal mode. And again, these colons here, that means you're going into your command line mode. And so here are a variety of things you can do to exit Vim. Most of the time, you probably want, you're editing a file, and you probably made some changes, and you probably want to save those changes. So these guys over here will not save your changes. So I would recommend starting with this one, which is WQ. And this is kind of an interesting feature of Vim, is that when the context is clear, you can abbreviate commands, and you can also put commands together. So W here stands for write, and Q stands for quit. Pretty intuitive. And you can actually write out write, W-R-I-T-E, and quit, Q-U-I-T. But oftentimes it's easier to just abbreviate them to WQ. It's a very common operation to do in Vim, especially W. I guess both W and Q. And then you'll press enter, and this will save the current buffer, and it will quit Vim. So this doesn't work all the time, I would say, because sometimes you can have multiple buffers open in Vim, and W will only write the current buffer, and Q will only close the current window. I think we'll talk about windows buffers later in the slides, but for right now, you can kind of think of a buffer as, you can kind of think of it as a file, or a view into the file. You can also use capital Z while you're in normal mode. That's not in command, but that's just in normal mode. You can do Q, you can do QA, you can do, and then if you add a exclamation mark, it'll ignore errors. So just be careful whenever you do QA exclamation mark, because it's very easy to lose unsaved changes. But if you just want to get out, use that. Now for movement, this is probably the biggest influence Vim has had on other programs. Many programs have Vim bindings. Not all of them have Vim editing bindings, but whether it's your shell, whether it's VSCode or JetBrains products, pretty much anything to have Vim bindings at the very least. Very often they don't have the same powerful features like command mode in Vim. But at the very least, if you get used to doing movement in Vim, that will kind of carry with you regardless of what tools you end up using. So the very, very basics are H, J, K, and L. And these are in normal mode again. So yes, according to this diagram, yep, J goes down, K goes up, H goes to the left, L goes to the right. By default, there's no line wrapping, although there's probably an option to change that. So if you do L at the very end of a line, it will go to the next line. So you need J and K for that. And then if you want to go up, you're going to do like fast scrolling, you can do Control U and Control V. So again, just make sure if you want to follow along in case you have any questions, start messing around with HJKL. There's also a very good program that comes installed with Vim called Vim Tutor. You just invoke Vim Tutor through the command line. We'll show you how to do this. And then we have actions. So there's movement and actions in Vim. Those are kind of the two big things. So these are your familiar operators for copy, cut, and change. So essentially, Vim is operator first, and then we do the selection. So like kind of three fundamental operators are yanking, which is basically like copying, and deleting, which is kind of like cutting. And then pasting would be P, although I don't believe you can do a count for P, but there is no motion to my knowledge. Yes. C is pretty useful. This is a way you can delete and then insert, but it's essentially the same as delete. It's the same as delete and insert, but you can just do it in one key instead. And then you have motions. And the idea of motions are you can select an arbitrary range of text. So W means a word. So if I have a sentence, the dog jumps over the brown fence, I can use W to move from word to word, and I'll move at the start of words. Or I could use E to move towards from the end of word to the end of word. And this is how you get productive with selecting a block of text, yanking it, deleting it, changing it. And we'll talk about visual mode in a second, but again, visual mode also plays into the motions, but these motions are just for movement. Again, we already talked about J, and we have $, which is at the end of a line. 0 can be towards the start of the line, 0 is the first character in a line, and caret is the very start of the line. And then all these can also be used in things like regular expressions for doing find and replace. And again, if you want to follow along, so I have my action, and I have my selector or my motion. So if I have YW, that would be yank the word, and then I'll copy the next word. You can also have count. So I could do delete and then 3J. So the way to read that is like delete is on one side, and then I'm doing 3 of J. So, go down 3 times. And we'll delete 3 lines. There are also some convenience operators where you can repeat the same thing, and usually that means for the same line. So this is the same thing for CC, YY, DD. These are again just conveniences. This is a very common operation within Vim. And again, can you do any of these in insert mode? Survey says. No. Yeah, there we go. Okay. You have to do all these in normal mode. All right, so commands. All we have here is write and help. Help is pretty useful. For both of these, oftentimes you can provide an argument. Oh yeah.
George, how do I paste all these lines I copied?
How do you paste all these lines? That's an excellent question, Pete. So we don't, it's not on this slide, but there is a P for paste. So let's say you're in normal mode, you're having a grand old time, and you just deleted some text. Let's say I want to move a word from the beginning of a line to the end of a line. So again, going with our example of, I don't have a visual here. Sorry about that, but the brown fox jumped over the white fence. My cursor was on the B in brown. I could then do DW, and it would cut from brown and then the space up to the next word.
Wait, George, we can do like a live demo.
Okay, that would be perfect.
Actually, just keep talking for the time being.
All right, but the live demo is a little technical difficulties, but we could delete that word, and now our this text is in a register. The register is a little bit advanced, but for right now you can think of it as it's like a more powerful version of copy paste. Then you just hate it when you copy something and you accidentally copy something else and you lost what you originally copied. That doesn't really happen in Vim because there's multiple registers. So you can save like multiple places to copy things into and then paste things out. That's the basic intuition. Yeah, but if I have something deleted, there's like a default register. Or if I did P and I didn't specify the register, it would use that one. So it works just like you would expect copy and paste to work normally. Yeah, and then I could move with my use W. I could use HJKL. I can move to where I want to paste it, and then I could just hit P, and whatever was in that register is now where my cursor was. Yeah, so this is another very important operator. You can't have copy without paste. I mean, you can, but it wouldn't be very useful.
All right. Okay, yeah, we can do the demo now. And if you want to, you move this.
Right.
Okay. All right, so you guys see that? Can Zoom see this? Well, okay. So it's weird because I can't see this. So as George was saying.
Yeah. So Richard's now going to type out the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy.
What?
Okay, so now Richard's going to use movement keys. Why don't you use L to move to Q? And notice you're in normal mode. There's nothing at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see the cursor, but it's all the way up there.
The cursor is quite small, but yeah. You can also see your position in the file. That's the line number, and that's the column number, basically. So now that we're on Q, we can do. You want to copy or cut a word? Audience participation. This is a repeat out of me. What's up?
but
Cut. All right, let's cut. So Richard, how do we cut a word?
I don't know. How do we cut a word?
Audience participation. DW, perfect. All right, let's try it. DW. Oh my God, it's gone. Where did it go? So Richard, if you could please execute go to command line mode. And now you can see we have the colon and our cursor is down at the bottom of the screen. And now we can type REG for registers. And we hit enter. And you will now see that
Oh, there's some information in there.
all right,
Okay.
okay. That's not, no flags, okay. Well, there's.
Wait, it's a good time to mention the 0 to 9.
Oh, for the 09 registers?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, these registers all have different names. So registers are prefixed with a, double quote. There's the kind of default thing, and so we can see what we just, cut, or what we just deleted, went into the default register, which is, quotation mark, and the content is quick, which is what we just cut. You can also do any of these operations, and you can specify a register. So you can do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Also, the reason these are populated with things, even though I doubt someone yanked or cut directly into these registers, is that these it basically is, it's like from most recently cut to least recently used.
It's like your clipboard history, essentially.
Yeah. So this is kind of nice. So if you delete something and then you delete something again, oftentimes it's not overwritten. It just kind of goes into one of these other registers. So it's not used by default, but if you type the or check which register it's in. And then if you want to do something, you have to specify this double quotation mark, then the register name. So in our case, it's a number. There's also special registers for certain things, which I think is kind of beyond the scope of this meeting, but feel free to look into that. And then you can do P to paste the contents of that register. So Richard, if you can now go to the end of the line, and how do we go to the end of the line? Does anyone remember?
George, you have a question.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Is that clipboard history like for when they're using Vim or like anything on it?
It's just Vim. There are certain options that can change if your clipboard history is shared by the system. So on Linux, there's just programs that, like whatever, like X11 window manager clipboard history. There's different ways you can modify that. I personally prefer in Vim to not share the two, because I can also copy and paste from my system clipboard manager into Vim and not pollute the two. Although, like in Emacs, for example, I'm pretty sure by default it does clobber your system clipboard history. So, pros and cons. Yeah, it's a great question. Any more questions? All right, so I heard $sign, and that is correct. So we're now at the end. And Richard, if you want to add a space, and we can do that by going into insert mode.
Well, let me point out that I'm not quite at the end. If you look at the cursor, it looks like it's just like one character short of the end. And this is because in Vim, by default, your cursor is on a character. So it is on the character R, but it can't be after the character R because there's nothing after that. Now, the exception to this is if you're on a new line, obviously there's no characters on that line. So your cursor is just on that blank line. This is configurable. But yeah, that's just why we're on R. So you said do insert mode.
We're gonna do insert mode, but
I'm at a space. Look at that.
Really, yeah, really quick. But here's the problem. We've inserted in the middle because we're on the R, and by default, insert mode puts us to the left of a character. So this is where you will learn to going deleting that. Perfect. So instead of going to the left of a character, entering insert mode on the left side of the character we're on, we can enter insert mode on the right side of the character, which can be accomplished with A for append. So now if we press A, now we can see the cursor has moved over. We're in insert mode, and if we were to type something, it's now on the, now we have a space on the right side of the word instead of in the middle. So Richard will back out into normal mode, pressing escape. And now that we have that space, we can hit P to paste the contents of the default register. And then if Richard wanted to paste a different register, you can just try register 0. You can also keep pasting.
Wait, why does it paste the? Oh. Does anyone know why it pastes the space? Any guesses?
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking to them.
Exactly, yeah. So when I deleted, or yanking is the same thing, but it moves the entire word plus the space at the end. So it goes until the start of the next word. So that's why there's just space. Oh yeah, and one really good thing you guys should know is press U to undo, just lowercase u. And then you can see at the bottom there, it's undoing. Very handy.
Now, how would I redo? I actually like all those threads. I want to go back. How would I do that?
Redo is Control R.
But, so it's not Control Z in Vim, it's U, and I don't know what redo is by default, but that's good. Wow, so difficult. We just gotta undo that and it's gone. All right. Anyone want to like see anything from what we've learned thus far? What Richard has been pulled up.
Who here already knows Vim? Show of hands. Okay.
All right. So if you want to temporarily hide the Vim window.
Perfect.
Try alt F. All right. So we just went over some examples of actions from manipulating text. We have commands. Perhaps we should have gone over those commands while we had that up, but oh well. Yeah, so you can do write, help. Help is very useful because if there's a specific thing in Vim you want to look for help for, you can just add a space and then whatever that is. So you could do help write, and it would take you to the part on the help page about writing. For write, by default, it'll write to the file which the buffer is visiting. So if you open a file in Vim, it'll like take the contents of that file, but it won't actually write back to that file until you tell it to write the contents of the buffer to the file. So it only writes when it tells it to. It's not really like, it's kind of like saving another editor. But you can also use W to write the contents of the buffer to a completely different file, or echo the contents of the file to a command or something like that. So this can be pretty powerful. There's probably better ways to copy files, but it can be useful if you want to make a new file or only want to copy part of a buffer to a new file. So that's write and help. We kind of already did it with the Vim example, so we'll skip this part. And then for the last thing to discuss about Vim, some Vim setup. Someone had said earlier configuration on editors. That's very true. Vim RC is where all this happens. To clarify, this is for Vim. If you are using a potentially newer distribution like NeoVim, I think it's a different file, and it's also it can be in Lua or VimScript. I personally prefer Lua. VimScript is a little bit jank, but each their own. Vim is also guaranteed to be on pretty much any box you remote into. NeoVim, not so much. So here we have Richard's personal Vim RC. You know, it's nice, it's simple. Has some same defaults like turning highlighting on when you're editing code. So yeah, I'm not going to make you type this out, but if you would like to download this, you can go to Richard's GitHub.
You can just copy it from the slides on the website.
We can also do that too. Yep. And just make sure it's in .vimrc or .config/vimrc. XCG home config directory. Also, Tim Pope is another person who has a good vimrc. All right. So while we're on the topic of modal editors, we're going to very briefly talk about SIGPwny, which I'm definitely mispronouncing. Sorry. So the primary difference between SIGPwny and Vim, Vim is much older. SIGPwny had the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of Vim, you could say. and it's its own editor. It's not a Vim clone like NeoVim, which, you know, on the back end is different, but it's still Vim. It's still meant to be Vim. VSCode has this philosophy of doing one thing and doing it well. So it pretty much only does text editing, and the point of, you know, window management, leave it in Emacs or i3, you know, bash scripts, just type your buffer to a bash script and let it do that. The point is very much just to only focus on text editing and having a good way to, you know, pipe input and output from other programs. So for example, I just took this from some random guy's configuration. Instead of Vim has its own built-in file navigator called netrc, which is quite nice actually. It's lightweight, it's not slow, but you know, it is built in. Instead of doing that, you can just have this arbitrary vroot file traversal thing, and it's literally as simple as just connect the pop-up, you know, specify some command line arguments, and it's like a 3-line thing you're configuring, because you're letting other programs pull the weight for you. All right. Let's talk about other editors that are not modal. We have GNU Emacs. A few people in here is editor of choice. So why would you use Emacs instead of other editors? Well, it's very extensible and hackable thanks to a system known as Emacs list. So in Vim, you use VimScript or potentially Lua. In Emacs, use a special dialect of list, Emacs list. Out of curiosity, how many people here know list? A list dialect. Yeah, even fewer people than who know Vim. Man, that sucks. I didn't see Richard's hand raised, but I know Richard knows this. The only downside to the hackableness of Emacs list is you get some pretty terrifying, you know, it works on my machine type of configurations. So it's very powerful, but it can also be a big foot gun. Again, Emacs is GNU software. Vim is also open source, not GNU, but still open source. But yeah, Emacs can be more fully featured and kind of engulf different parts. Text, it's not just text editor, right? It's much more than text editor. And that is both probably the largest pro and the largest con of Emacs. So you can check your mail, your calendar, your to-do list, you know, all these things, all these features directly from within Emacs. But at the same time, a lot of this stuff is very, very old. You still have things packaged in that are for browsing Usenet, which I don't think anyone here uses Usenet nowadays. So why might you not want to use Emacs? First of all, the key bindings by default, many people think key bindings are not that great. There's a lot of heavy reliance on control, meta, which is like alt, shift. So you kind of have your pinky in the bottom left of your keyboard a lot of the time. A lot of the key bindings are very long to do very simple tasks, even just like cutting and pasting. And so to clarify, Emacs by default is not a modal editor. Although again, this extensible and hackable part, you can make it a modal editor, which is why it's kind of nice. But by default, Emacs key bindings, if you actually boot up Bash or Z shell, by default, it'll use Emacs key bindings. So you can edit your command while you're typing it using Emacs key bindings. You can like use like Control A to go to the start of a line, or I think Control E is the end and Control A is the beginning, I'm pretty sure. You can try that out right now, but you can also switch it to Vim mode, which is probably a little bit faster for most people. Yeah, and then also in Emacs, if something breaks, you're just kind of screwed. There is no, like, you basically have to fix it yourself. Like, there is no live share in Emacs, and they're probably, actually, I wouldn't say this, there never will be, but yeah, I don't think people writing Emacs lists actually care about live share. So, all right, we have VSCode. Richard and I don't really know what to say about VSCode because we don't use it, but it is open source. Fast, maybe a little bit questionable, but very extensible. You can write extensions in JavaScript. Again, I don't want to say it's not extensible, it definitely is. You can use Vim bindings in VSCode. And then if you like using your mouse, that can be very powerful. There's, you know, multiple cursors. You know, you can do things like special Docker compose commands, nice pictures for Git. You know, it can be pretty fancy. The goal of this meeting is not to shame people who use VSCode, because it's very powerful. Just to produce some, alternatives. But yeah, that's it for the editing. I would encourage everyone to start playing around with them, and potentially Emacs. Okay, question.
Any question on the Emacs slide?
Yeah.
So why is the cons list longer than the pros?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I would say that accurately describes, GNU Emacs.
We're not trying to convince you to use Emacs. We're just letting you know it's an option and that we use it.
Someone removed the Connie pasta off the slides, so that was.
And also, each bullet point is not weighted equally. Like Emacs Pinky, I don't get Emacs Pinky, so I don't understand.
Yeah,
Okay, at the downside of you usually split like half Ergo keyboard and Comax. Like, of course, you're not gonna have the Emacs Pinky. You solved a completely different issue.
To clarify, the answer is not Vim or Emacs. The answer is both. You know, we've solved religious conflict, okay? Like, if only people thought about, you know, the answer is not one religion, but all religions. You know? So you no longer have Emacs Pinky, you use Vim bindings and Emacs. So you get all the good parts of Vim, and all the good parts of Emacs, with minimal downside. But we're gonna talk about that. Any more? Okay, we don't really have much on Emacs specifically, because a lot of what you can do with Vim, you can also do with Emacs. And Vim is kind of the more fundamental, for historical purposes, you should know how to, it would be nice to know how to use Vim. Any more questions here? We will not be discussing Emacs with all key bindings, because they kind of suck. No offense.
Okay, but they work in your terminal though. Did you know that?
Vim bindings also work here. You can configure your Python REPL uses readline. You can just configure that to use Vim bindings. You can use Bash, Z Shell, Fish. They can all use Vim bindings.
By default.
You know, you can play like an old game from the 70s. They use Vim bindings.
It does do MX because in the keyboard.
I mean, it's everywhere. But yeah. But again, you know, if you have to install Mutt to check your email using Vim bindings, you can just do it in Emacs. You know? Yeah. Any questions? This is kind of the end of the meeting. So again, the thing I want all of you to do on your respective package managers, install. Okay, Vim is probably already installed, but if it's not, install it anyway. Maybe install Emacs. We're just saying, you know, do not fall into the hole that we fell down into, but you know, maybe give it a try if you have lots of free time this semester. But yeah, so again, just to circle back, next meetings on Thursday, we're gonna be doing intro to pen testing with Ronan. And then next Friday, we're gonna be doing CTF quals. So we all
Friday CTF will have free pizza and we'll be in person. So come for some free pizza.
Yep.
Where is it?
To be announced, but it'll be in Seabowl 2405 most likely.
And who we will steal?
Yes, question.
Then CPF, is like knowledge of program sufficient, or should you have some knowledge of cybersecurity as well?
You can just show up. There's usually for these types of CTFs, there's like a very wide range of things. So even if you don't know how to do, you don't know how to rock, you can still contribute to maybe some jank music challenge, or I don't know, like you should just show up. Even if it's a very good place to learn how to deal with challenges. So you look over someone's shoulder while they solve a challenge. And you would be very surprised the ways you can contribute. I don't think there's OSINT that dice, but you never know.
The more experienced players are going to lead beginner challenges for people to try out. So we won't clear everything out. That's easy to do.
All right. Yeah. So again, one more time, this is the meeting flag. So yeah, we have 2 challenges currently up. There is a 3rd Emacs challenge, which is currently broken. Literally, you know, par for the course for Emacs. But yeah, that'll be up probably in the next hour or so. So Richard and I will be going around helping you with Vim. So start using Vim. Start getting creative. the first half of the